Welcome back. Today we're diving into episode 9 of our 11-part explainer series, unpacking Bree Stong's incredible book, A Soulful Transition, Finding Heart-Led Career in the Age of AI. And today's focus, leading others through the void. Let's get right into it. Okay, let's dive into this. If you're a leader right now, I really want to invite you to just pause. Seriously, take a breath. Think of this explainer as a slow, intimate fireside chat where the pressure is completely off. We're just here to reflect. Because let's be honest, there's a silent question echoing through boardrooms and home offices everywhere right now. Will I still matter when machines outperform my cognitive labor? If you've been carrying the heavy weight of senior leadership, you've probably had those 3 a.m. moments, right? Staring at the ceiling, feeling this intense, almost unexplainable weariness. And I want you to hear this loud and clear. That exhaustion, it is absolutely not a failure of your stamina. No way. It is a deeply human, completely natural reaction to the AI revolution. It's the symptom of human consciousness waking up inside a corporate role that was literally never designed to hold this much complexity. And guess what? The people looking up to you, they're quietly asking the exact same question. So what starts as a deeply personal void, well, it quickly becomes a collective one. You start to notice it across the whole organization. Meetings start to feel packed with people, but completely hollow. Exciting new initiatives launch with this high-gloss energy, and then they just quietly fizzle out 3 months later. The aliveness, what the author calls the prana of the organization, it's just thinned out. And our instinctive, business school-trained response? Add more structure, add more KPIs, sharper narratives, move faster. But here is the hard reality. You simply cannot process your way out of a collective identity crisis. You have to presence your way through it. This isn't a problem of missing information, it's a problem of orientation. Now, what's really interesting about this is that this invisible weight so many leaders are carrying actually has a name. It's called moral injury, and it is the true hidden source of that quiet, incredibly unique loneliness you feel as a senior executive. Moral injury rarely happens in one big, dramatic Hollywood moment. It's way more subtle than that. It's the slow accumulation of small compromises. It's staying silent when the truth feels a little too politically inconvenient, or maybe framing sheer team exhaustion as resilience just to satisfy a brutal quarterly target. These small actions slowly erode the bridge between your job and your soul, creating a really dangerous dislocation. To lead others through the void, we first have to heal this hidden wound and get back to our own integrity. To really ground this idea, let's look at the story of a senior executive named Anna. Anna was gearing up to announce a massive restructuring, totally driven by the integration of generative AI. By every single corporate metric you could look at, the logic was undeniable. The board was fully aligned, the numbers were absolute perfection. But the night before the big announcement, Anna found herself sitting alone in her living room, laptop closed, just grieving. She wasn't scared of the employee backlash or taking a hit to her reputation. She was grieving the version of leadership she once believed in, a version where efficiency didn't feel so much like a massive loss of human dignity. She confessed this incredibly profound thought. She said, "I don't know how to stand in front of them tomorrow without betraying something in myself." Wow. So the next day, Anna did something completely radical. She dropped the corporate armor. She didn't hide behind some polished 50-page slide deck packed with executive jargon. Instead, she just spoke plainly to her people. She acknowledged the loss, and she actually named the fear out loud to her team. She didn't offer any fake, toxic optimism. She just offered her genuine, unvarnished presence. And what happened? The room was dead silent. But the trust didn't collapse. It actually deepened immensely. She proved right there that presencing a transition builds so much more trust than just coldly processing a layoff. Let's move to and see how this builds into an actual practical framework you can use, because it requires what's called a systemic coaching stance. Think of it as basically an equation for conscious leadership. First, it starts with seeing. That means looking past all the surface-level symptoms and the finger pointing and viewing the whole system in flux. Then you add space, meaning you maintain a protective professional distance. And finally, you subtract judgment. When you drop the judgment that your team's fear is somehow unprofessional, you immediately stop wasting vital energy fighting reality. You actually start agreeing to reality. And that is exactly what allows your people to stop pretending and start solving the actual problem at hand. And this brilliantly illustrates how a leader has to constantly make a choice to maintain that space. Are you going to be a thermometer, or are you going to be a thermostat? We so often trick ourselves into thinking that caring means merging with our team's stress, that reflecting their panic shows empathy. But that's just being a thermometer. A thermostat, on the other hand, regulates the room's energy. Think of a firefighter, right?
They care deeply about saving lives, but they don't go running into a blazing building without their protective gear. You have to maintain your own internal space so you can safely anchor the dozens or maybe hundreds of people who are looking to you for a sign that they're going to be okay. A super tactical way to apply this in the real world is through something called the emotional retro. Now, usually retrospectives are just these dry, data-heavy postmortems where we overanalyze burn-down charts. But when your organization is galloping blindly toward a cliff, logic alone just isn't going to cut it. The author shares this fascinating anecdote about a leadership team offsite. The CEO was up there presenting this flawless, airtight 3-year growth plan, but the entire room was gripped by this brittle, resigned silence. Everyone just felt it. The facilitator actually paused the meeting and asked the team a simple question. Check your packs. What kind of fuel do you have left? The CEO finally dropped his guard and admitted, out loud, that he was terrified they didn't even have the fuel to survive Q1. That moment of raw vulnerability completely shattered the silence. It shifted the group from a bunch of isolated, stressed-out individuals into a resonance tribe, ready to actually tackle the reality together. As you build that resonance tribe, you are inevitably going to run into what's known as the systemic fog. Imagine a team living their whole lives in a 2-dimensional flatland. Everything is flat. Suddenly, a 3-dimensional ball drops right into their world. This represents the massive, totally unprecedented shift of the AI revolution. To the 2D team, this ball looks completely disconnected and erratic. They try to force this complex 3D shift into their old 2D maps, and they just get completely spun around and confused. Your job as a leader is to help them look up. Instead of forcing the new reality into old boxes, you have to ask what are known as teal questions. Things like, what is this project asking to become? Rather than, how do we force this to hit our Q3 numbers?
But here's the catch. How on earth can a team possibly have the energy to look up and ask those big questions if they're drowning in work? Well, we can actually learn a lot from the Okinawan principle of hara hachibu. It's the practice of filling your belly to only 80%, because eating until you're completely stuffed actually causes damage. We desperately need to apply this exact same logic to our corporate calendars. The old mindset is terrified of empty space, right? We try to pack our team's capacity to 110%. But in the age of AI, you have to ruthlessly protect 20% of your team's schedule as white space or hang time. Complex, game-changing insights simply cannot emerge if your team is stuffed to the absolute brim with back-to-back meetings and repetitive administrative robot work. Creating that vital white space requires what we call the sunset strategy. It means it is time to intentionally transition your department's entire value proposition. In the past, the old way of doing things meant marketing your team based on speed and volume. How fast can we churn this out? But let's be real, you simply cannot compete with AI on sheer volume anymore. It's a losing battle. The new value proposition, wisdom and synthesis. You delegate the initial drafting, the heavy lifting, the robot work to the AI, and you aggressively protect your team's energy so they can provide the high-context, irreplaceable human insight that actually drives real strategy. To maintain this kind of deep clarity under relentless, everyday pressure, you need a quick ritual. Let me introduce you to the 10-second systemic reset for the boardroom. It's basically a quick identity detox. Right before you walk into your next high-stakes meeting, I want you to imagine physically taking off your job title like it's a magnetic name badge and just placing it on your desk. Take a breath and remind yourself, I am going to use this title today to get things done, but I am not this title. It sounds simple, but it's a total game changer. It immediately shifts you from being a reactive person whose ego takes a hit when a project wobbles into a grounded, whole person who knows they are completely safe to just solve the problem. So, the crucial point is that leading others through this massive transition ultimately means leading without your armor. As machines absorb more and more of our daily cognitive labor, that old armor of pure technical expertise is going to wear incredibly thin. What actually remains when the expertise is commoditized? Your character. At the end of the day, your team isn't going to remember a perfectly worded email or a flawless slide deck. They just aren't. They are going to remember if you genuinely listened to them. They'll remember how you treated them when they were terrified and vulnerable, and whether you protected their dignity when the pressure was at its absolute highest. Which brings us to our final and perhaps most important thought. The AI revolution isn't primarily a technical challenge for leaders. It's really a moral and spiritual one. You, as a leader, are becoming the anti-algorithm. Think about it. The machine is there to process the past. But my question to you is, are you awake enough to sense the future? Your greatest value in the boardroom isn't your busyness anymore. It's your conscious, undeniably human presence. Take that thought with you into your next strategy meeting. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I literally cannot wait to explore the next chapter of this soulful transition with you soon.